Hey everyone, welcome back. Hope you're having a fantastic day so far. So in today's video, we're going to be going over another idea as far as Social Security reform goes. And this idea, at least in my opinion, may be one of the best ones yet. I would love to hear your thoughts on that. Plus, we go over another country's presidential election, who just won, and why that might actually suggest who may be our president come 2024. But before we go ahead and dive into the main content of today's video, if you wouldn't mind helping me out real quickly by just giving this video a like, that just helps out with the good old YouTube algorithm, and also consider subscribing to my channel if you have not already. So in our lead story for today, we're going to be talking about another country's presidential election, who just won, and why that may actually suggest who could possibly be our next president come November of 2024. So over in Argentina, of course, we know they've had a lot of inflation. Inflation has been sort of a worldwide issue. Of course, in certain countries, it's been worse than others. And Argentina, of all the countries in the world, have perhaps been hit the hardest out of all of them. So, of course, they just had a presidential election. This was a huge one because obviously, citizens of Argentina are just fed up with how their government is run. They're fed up with all the inflation. It's crippling for them. I mean, it's been crippling for us, but for them, it's been much, much worse. So obviously this was huge, and voters went out in huge numbers, and they pretty much made their opinions known. So according to Fox News, Javier Milei crushes Argentine left, becomes world's first libertarian head of state. So how can the current economy minister of a nation with 140% inflation and 40% living below the poverty line win a presidential election? It turns out that he can't, at least not in Argentina. Libertarian outsider congressman and economist Javier Milei of the Liberty Advances Party won a decisive victory tonight over the establishment's center-left candidate, the Peronista Sergio Massa. They go on to say that anger over rampant inflation, poverty, insecurity, and corruption within the ranks of the Peronist Party clearly trumped the institutional advantages of Massa, who counted on vast state resources and the enormous and powerful Peronist political machinery to mobilize masses of supporters. That includes an enormous number of unionized workers in both the public and private sectors who tend to lean left. Indeed, 40% of Argentinian workers are unionized compared to only 11% in the United States. So we actually have a lot of people comparing the guy who just won the presidential election in Argentina to Donald Trump, just because he's sort of an outsider to politics. He has not been in politics his entire life. And he kind of has like the Trump personality, I guess, where he's very good at working with crowds. He's very much established on social media rather than just like using the other sources of media that we're typically used to. So if our election ends up anything like Argentina's, where they were facing very hard times with the economy, a lot of inflation, well, if our election is like theirs, then that might actually suggest that Donald Trump is, in fact, going to beat Joe Biden in the upcoming election. If we look at some recent polling here, I mean, this is just polling. It doesn't mean that one candidate is going to beat the other, no matter what the polling is. But if you look down the line, we have Trump winning pretty much every single poll, rather than the one by Rasmussen Reports. So, it looks there, at least by the polling. And if we look at other countries' elections, at least Argentina, where they end up picking someone on the right versus the left, where they were facing a lot of inflation and economic hardship. So it should be interesting to see how everything plays out. And with that said, who do you think is going to win in the 2024 election? Are you picking Biden or are you picking Trump? Okay, so at this point, I'm going to go ahead and move on to the main topic of today's video. Probably the reason why you clicked on the video. It has to do with Social Security reform and, of course, an update with the Social Security increase. So as we all know, we have a few different plans out there. I actually made a video yesterday where I detailed 5 different plans that are currently out there. I went pretty far in depth. It was a longer video, at least for my channel. And 2 of the most popular plans, of course, is Bernie Sanders' Social Security Expansion Act. And then, of course, we have John Larson's Social Security 2100 Act. In both those bills, there's a lot of increases, a lot of really popular things, but they really don't stand much of a chance at passing because right now they only have Democratic support. But just for an example, we have, of course, in the Social Security Expansion Act by Bernie Sanders, there would be a $200 increase across the board. And then for those receiving the special minimum benefit, they would be receiving a huge boost a bigger boost than everyone else. They would actually be receiving a boost as high as $485 per month. That's because they would be receiving 25% above the federal poverty line, whereas right now they're actually receiving slightly below the federal poverty line. So it would be huge for them. And then, of course, the cost of living adjustments would also be increased every single year because they would look at both the CPIW as well as the CPIE, and whichever one of them happens to be higher, they would go with that one. Whereas right now they only go with the CPIW. So if either of those bills pass, obviously that would do a lot of really great things for Social Security and its solvency issue, as well as making the payments more generous. But in today's video, we're going to look at another plan that's been thrown out there by a few different politicians. Not really sure how seriously it's being looked at across the board, but just looking at it myself personally, I really, truly think that this plan makes the most sense. So this was an article that was actually written by the Slate, and I want to hear your thoughts and comments below on what you think about this idea, and if you think it should be implemented. Just because it's my opinion, you could certainly feel free to disagree. So according to the Slate, the Social Security Act was signed into law on August 14th, 1935. At that time, there were 7.8 million Americans who were eligible to receive benefits. The first person to receive them was a woman named Ida Mae Fuller. She received that first monthly check in 1940. She was 65 years old, and her check was $22.54, the equivalent of about $500 today. Interestingly enough, according to the History Channel, she was a staunch small government conservative, and in the 1970s, she went on record opposing Social Security payout increases. When Fuller died in 1975, she was 100 years old. She had paid into Social Security a little less than today's equivalent of $550. During about the 4 decades of retirement, she received more than 900 times her investment. So obviously she came out pretty well, and it probably won't shock you to hear that times have changed since Ida Mae Fuller got that first check. For one thing, in 1935, fewer than 8 million Americans were eligible for Social Security. In 2020, almost 70 million Americans received Social Security. And so the idea that people who are too old to work shouldn't be left to starve is, I think, a pretty noble one. And even as a libertarian, somebody who doesn't think the government should do all that much, that still seems like a pretty reasonable thing for the government to do, to provide that sort of base level for people to stay out of old age destitution. But that's not what Social Security is anymore, by and large, right? There are still certainly some older folks out there who might need help making ends meet, but retirees are one of the richest cohorts in the country these days. The way Social Security operates is that it's basically a conveyor belt of money. It's a transfer of wealth from people who are young and working and productive because it's funded with payroll taxes. And so it takes those tax dollars and transfers them directly to retirees. And unlike in the 1940s, these days you've got retirees that are generally wealthier than people who are funding their retirements through Social Security. So I think we need a radical rethink of the program. And that's sort of the general idea there, that, things are very much different today than they were during the 1940s. Unlike in the 1940s, we actually have very, very wealthy people who are at their retirement age and receiving Social Security benefits. So let's just think, for example, people, obviously this is an exaggeration, but people with a large amount of wealth, like, Bill Gates, Warren Buffett, Charlie Munger, Michael Bloomberg, even Donald Trump, all these people, are either at their retirement age or above it. You have to check me on that, but if they have that much wealth, if they have billions of dollars in net wealth, and their net worth is that high, should they be receiving a Social Security check? And that's sort of the idea here, that Social Security should be sort of a safety net program. It should be there for folks who really absolutely need it. And for someone who already has a lot of net wealth, someone who has millions of dollars stashed away in their savings, do they really need like a safety net there to help them through times? Probably not. But if for whatever reason times went tough for them, even if they were previously a millionaire, and times get tough where they're not having enough income to get by, then at that point, it's probably something that should be paid out to them. But that's sort of the general idea, and something that I could probably agree with, that even though you are paying into the program throughout your working career, perhaps you should still not receive it if you ended up, pretty well off, where you're able to save up a lot of money. You had some really good investments that turned out well. In that case, we should probably increase payments for people who are struggling the most during their retirement days. And then, instead of sending money to people who are doing very well, just end up foregoing their payments altogether. But let me know what your thoughts and comments are on that below. Would definitely love to read them. But that's all we have for today's video. I certainly hope that you enjoyed and found value out of it. If you did, again, I would greatly appreciate if you could give this video a like. Consider subscribing to my channel if you have not already. And I will see you in the next video.